Python or JavaScript? Which one is better? So let's get into what are they used for before we answer that question. For Python, you can actually use it for data science, web development with Django and Flask. You can also use it for machine learning and AI, as well as some backend development, since it's mostly a backend language. With JavaScript, on the other hand, you can actually use it for front-end and backend development. You can also use it for mobile development using React Native. You can also use it for desktop application development with Electron, and you can also use it with TensorFlow. So you can also use it for AI and machine learning. In terms of how easy it is to learn, both of them are easy to learn for beginners, and in the future I'll probably make a simple tutorial for both languages. Alright, to make this comparison fair, we're actually going to be going into an editor, and we're actually going to be looking at the syntax and functionality, and I have it in 5 categories. So we're going to be looking at how you can print/output stuff on the screen. Then we're going to be looking at how you can declare variables in both of them, conditionals, which are if, else, and else if statements, and then we're going to be looking at for loops and while loops. So let's get into that. Alright, so here I am in the replit, and I'm going to be outputting text on the screen. So let's start with output. So how do you output text in Python? So in Python, you have a print function. So all you type in is print, the 2 parentheses, and then you have 2 double quotes, and then you just say hello world. You run that, and there you have it. Hello world right there is on the screen. Pretty simple. Alright, with JavaScript on the other hand, it's different. So there's multiple ways you can actually do this. So here's what we're going to do. This is the most simple way that we can actually do this. So we have a paragraph tag right here with an ID of test, and that ID is actually important. You'll see why. So we're going to go and type in document dot get element by ID. Then we're going to type in the name of the ID in a string, which is test. Then dot inner HTML, and then we're going to have equal, and then in a string hello world. And if we refresh that now, there we have it. We have hello world right there. And there's also a bunch of other ways that you can output in JavaScript. Let's use document again. This time I'm going to type in document.write, parentheses, and then hello world, refresh. And as you can see, there it is once again. So just to show you that it actually works, let me remove it, refresh, and it's not there anymore. Then we're going to type in document.write hello world, refresh, and there it is right there. The next way you can actually do this is you can have, let's say, alert, and then you can add a string hello world. When we refresh it now, it gives us this, which is hello world, in like this pop-up box right here. And not only that, in JavaScript, another way that you can actually output is on the console. So we're going to do console.log, and then type in the string right there, and then we're going to refresh it. You won't see anything, but when we inspect, and if you go to the console, and there we go, hello world. So yeah, that's how you output in JavaScript. Alright, the next category is variables. So how can you set a variable in Python and print it out? Alright, here's how you do it. Let's put in a name, and let's just put in Daniel, just for argument's sake. You know my name is actually Daniel. And with that name, we can actually print it out. All we need to do is just put in the variable name. If we run it, it prints out Daniel. In JavaScript, on the other hand, there's actually 3 different variables. You have name right there. So you also have let right there. And then you also have a constant. I have a variable called name with the name Daniel. So how can you output it? Well, just like in JavaScript, just like in Python, name. And if we refresh that, and there you go, the name Daniel pops up. Let's say, for instance, you have another variable named var, and then want to change it to, let's say, just John. If we refresh, it's going to output John, because with var variable, we can actually change it. And the same thing goes, let's say we had like a function right here. Here's what will happen. If you refresh, it will still be John, because even if it's in this scope right here, which a scope is basically like where a variable sits, so it could be outside of the scope, which means it's outside of like these curly braces right here. If it's inside a scope, then that means it's inside curly braces or like in a function. So because we have John right here at the bottom, it's going to run this instead of name. Now, how can we solve that? Let's say, for instance, we'll have let right there. So we have let name Daniel and let John. If we refresh, it's actually going to be Daniel. Why? Because document.write is outside of the scope. So the word name Daniel is outside of these curly braces, and that's the thing. But what if we had document.write inside of it though? Then if we refresh, it actually turns into John. Alright, so what about const now? So we have const and then we have let. What would happen here? So if we refresh it, it picks Daniel. But actually, I did it wrong. It's in a code block. So let's say we remove it. If we remove it from that code block and if we refresh, as you can see, it gives an error. So if we inspect and we go to the console, there it is, uncut syntax error. Identifier name has already been declared, and that's the thing about const. Const cannot be changed. So if you try to change it, it's going to throw an error. So a constant is a variable that never changes. Alright, next up is conditional statements. These would be your if, else, else if statements. So let's say, for instance, we have two variables, x and y. X equals 12, y equals 5. And we want to say that if x is larger than y, print that x is larger than y. Here's how you do it. So we're going to say if x is more than y, print x is greater than y. And then you run it and it says x is greater than y because x is greater than y. Now let's say we have else now. Else basically is if the first statement isn't true, then print the last statement. Then we have to just say print y is greater than x. If we run it, it's not going to be true. So let's say we flip it. This is 5, this is 12. If you run, there you go, y is greater than x. So that's how you do if statements and else statements in Python. But there's also another one, else if. Else if is basically if the first one isn't true, then the second one should run. So let's say if x is equal to y. So if we add 5 and we run it, there you go, x is equal to y. So that's else if statement. Alright, so in JavaScript, how do if statements work now? In JavaScript, it works similar to Python. It's pretty simple. If x is greater than y, then we have curly braces. Then we can just say document.write x is greater than y. Pretty simple. And if you refresh, it does that. And then here's how you do else statements. Document.write. So if we flip that, refresh, there you go, y is greater than x. How you do else if now? You do else if. So else if would be, let's say x is equal to y. So let's do that. So y equals 5, refresh, x is equal to y. So in Python, you realize that we can actually use two equal signs, and that's used to compare if one thing is equal to another. And the same thing goes with JavaScript, but in JavaScript you can actually use a third one. The third one is used to compare not only if it's equal, but also if the data type of it is equal. So let's say y is equal to x, mean that the data type is equal. But let's say we change that, it's a string. Refresh, there we go, y is greater than x. Why? Because x and y are not integers. Y is a string now, x is an integer, and you can actually do that in JavaScript, which is pretty cool. Alright, let's move on to for loops now. So in Python, the for loops are completely different than most programming languages. So as you can see right here, we have a for loop that says for x in range 1 and comma 6. So range just simply means, the way the range function works is that 1 is where it starts, but 6 is where it ends. But here's the thing, if you run it, it only has 1 and 5, because 6 is actually where it stops and it won't print out the end number. So how can we do that but in JavaScript? So in JavaScript, it's actually how most programming languages actually do for loops. So as you can see, we have a for and then we have a variable called I, and this is to initialize it, meaning to start the variable. Then we have a second one that basically tells it's almost like a condition, meaning that in order to run the for loop, the condition has to be met or true. So I has to be less than 5, which right now it's equal to 0, so it's less than 5. And then the third one is basically what to do each time the function is running, or when the condition is met right here. And this time you're supposed to add I, which means that each time it runs, it's going to add it, which means when it loops, it's going to add 1. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3 until it's no longer less than 5. And the result is this right here. Now obviously I added plus br, which is a break tag, so it's gonna add a new line. So if you don't do that, if you don't add a new line, then it's going to give you this right here. But either way, we did the same thing like we did in Python. So that's how you do for loops in Python and JavaScript. Alright, let's talk about while loops now. So in Python, this is how you do a while loop. So you have while, and then I is less than 5, or any variable, doesn't matter. Then of course colon, and then indent it, and then you have print, and then you can do I plus 1, which is basically used to add the variable. So you run it, and there you go, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. What if we didn't have that though? Let's run it. There we go, it just prints 0, 0, 0, because while loops are unbounded. So all you need is to make sure that the condition is true, and you will continuously print it. When it comes down to JavaScript, on the other hand, it's basically the same. You have a variable while I is more than 10, less than 10, sorry, document.write I plus plus, and then refresh, and it gives you this right here. If we don't add that, it's basically going to break the program actually, so I'm not even going to do that. But yeah, that is how you do a while loop in both Python and JavaScript, or actually how different they are. So in conclusion, both of these programming languages are great in their own way, and each of them have their own functionalities. In terms of which one is better, that's for you to decide. But to me, in terms of which one to learn first, if you want to do web development, then I'll recommend that you learn HTML, CSS, as well as JavaScript, as in my opinion it's more simpler than Django and Flask, and they are built into the web, so there's no need to install anything. But if you just want to get into programming and see what it's about, then Python can be a great language for its simplicity and English-like syntax. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching.